All right, guys, welcome to Monday game week.
We've finally made it.
It's Clemson. And then, that catches people's eye. It gets a little extra adrenaline rush.
It's Clemson, Georgia, that are about, 80 miles apart with a lot of history, a lot of tradition. You best believe people going to tune in to watch that one.
It's going to be a feather in the cap of someone. Whoever wins the game is going to be going into that playoff committee talk with a strength of schedule, a major win, because both teams are going to have good seasons after that.
I know the team's excited. I know I'm excited. A sense of urgency has definitely been up. You go through fall camp, you really focus on you. You get out of camp, really start to, hone in on, your week one, which is Clemson for us.
This week on The Beat, we'll answer those lingering questions you've got heading into the opener and Mike's insight into how Saturday in the Bins is going to go down. Let's go.
Giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dawgs. This is On The Beat, presented by Ingles with DawgNation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins.
Well, hey everybody, Mike Griffith here, and welcome to this week's edition of On the Beat. Cody, can you believe it's finally game week? And man, what a game it is. Kirby Smart and Dabo Swinney, 4 of the last 8 national championships between these coaches. They meet on the field Saturday in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, high noon showdown.
I love it so much when the season starts with the big game. When you go into the season and you're playing a cupcake, it's just not the same feeling. When you've got a huge one, nationally televised game, everybody's eyes will be on this one. It just feels a little different.
Yeah, no doubt about it. You don't want to say must win because there's a 12-team playoff this year, but you play this out, and you could have the SEC champion playing the ACC champion. More on that later, Florida State fans. And yet, it could also mean who gets to host and who plays away from home in the first round of the playoff, should one of these teams slip up and not win their conference. So a lot at stake in the opener for both Georgia and Clemson.
Yeah, and we finally get to talk about real football. No speculating like we've done since, against that FSU game all the way back. And that was in December. Dogs have not played in this calendar year yet. So we're finally getting to talk about real football. And there are definitely real questions as we head into this game against Clemson. First and foremost, will Trevor Etienne play? You were in the press conference with Kirby Smart, and boy, he was ducking and dodging and weaving. He avoided that question about 6 different ways.
Yeah, well, who knows? Maybe it's not settled. You almost wonder if there's kind of a give and take or some pull here. Look, Etienne had a very well-documented driving incident in the offseason, Cody, but Georgia's come out and they're fining players now. They're getting in the players' pockets and taking money from them. Now, do players still need to be suspended when they're already being fined? It's kind of a new world problem and situation, and I kind of look at it like, why punish the whole team over a driving incident in the offseason? If Etienne is being fined, I don't know why he would also need to be suspended. The idea when it comes to discipline is to teach these young men lessons. Does he really learn that much more by missing a football game rather than losing, upwards thousands of dollars out of his pocket? So you wonder what's going to happen with Georgia and Trevor Etienne. And it's important because, like you said, Cody, there's some other backs in that backfield, maybe not as experienced.
I think, Mike, you're right in one case. I think the fine definitely does, take a chunk of change out of those guys' pockets, and it makes a difference. And I think other programs around the country, a driving-related incident, maybe the guy just pays the fine and he still plays. I think it's different with this team still. We're only a couple years away. And when you hear the arrest report of Trevor Etienne, it was 80 to 90 miles an hour crossing double yellow lines to pass people. I think that's where this game or this team just cannot have that. Somebody asked me the other day, they said, I can't see anybody challenging Kirby. How is this team going to be challenged? I think the challenge comes from within for Kirby because the only thing that's going to do them in is themselves, and it's those off-field incidents that would just, if they keep getting bigger. So you've got to nip that in the bud. I think that's why this one is not just going to be a fine, but he's got to sit out as well.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know that. Again, I'm not sure that any of these previous driving-related traffic incidents is involved a fine as well. If you gave Trevor Etienne the option of sitting out a game or paying money, then maybe I'd agree with you. But to lose thousands of dollars of money on an incident that occurred in the offseason months ago, again, hurts the entire program. I don't know that the lesson has any more gravity for Etienne if you sit him out a game. And who's to say that he has to sit out this game? Why not sit him out in game 2? What is the point of this? Do you want to punish and teach Trevor Etienne, or do you want to punish the entire University of Georgia football team, the fans, and all the work that the other 105 guys have put in, as well as that coaching staff, as well as all the donors that have donated hundreds of millions of dollars to give Georgia the best facilities? Again, I think the suspension idea is outdated, especially when it comes to non-related issues with substance abuse, and when it comes to having already fined a player several thousands of dollars. I guess I look to the NFL as an example, Cody. Now that we're seeing players paid, I look at the NIL model as being more applicable to college. And I don't know that I've seen a whole lot of NFL players fined for traffic incidents where no one was injured.
I think, maybe Kirby Smart, this is the turning of a new leaf, and maybe this is the new way, and maybe this will be the game that we find that out. If that is not the case, because Kirby Smart has not said straight up whether or not he's going to just fine Trevor Etienne or he'll fill out to sit out this game. So you say it's gonna challenge everybody on the team. How big of an impact, as we know, Roderick Robinson out with turf toe, he had to have surgery, going to be out for a while. How big of an impact will it be if Trevor Etienne cannot go or is not allowed to go against Clemson?
Well, I mean, you're talking about, one of the top 10 running backs in the nation not going. If that's the case, and again, I want to repeat that at this time of this show has not been announced or perhaps not even determined. I mean, Kirby Smart, again, would not acknowledge that question directly at the Monday press conference. But you just said it. Rod Robinson is next up, and a guy who would be used in concert with Etienne when healthy. This is a 240-pound power back that can really move the pile. He's been dealing with turf toe. He's out indefinitely. So here's what you're left with. You've got incoming freshman Nate Frazier, who by all rights has looked great in scrimmages, but this kid wasn't even here in the spring. I don't think he got on campus until June. As dynamic and as explosive as Nate Frazier is, you're talking about putting a true freshman into the spotlight of a season-opening game. I don't even know if he's played on this sort of field turf before. So that seems to be really taking a chance. And then you've got the other Robinson, Branson Robinson. Now, here's a guy that suffered a very serious knee injury just in fall camp last year. Hasn't been full go in a game ever since. Hadn't played a game in 2 seasons. He's come back some, but is he back all the way? And where is he at on that comeback? Where's the confidence at for Branson Robinson on that serious knee injury? And then you got Cash Jones, and he's a wily, crafty, little player, very little player, but he was a walk-on for a reason. So if you're telling me that this doesn't have a direct effect, I would probably challenge that. I think this has a huge effect. I think this opens the door for Clemson because they have a very good front seven. I mean, it's a strength on strength. Now, Georgia may have the best offensive line in the nation, but I will tell you that Clemson has one of the best, probably top 5 front sevens when it comes to run defense in the nation. So I think this really challenges Georgia. If Etienne can't play, I think it's a factor.
So all right, you talked about it. If Etienne's not there, you got a 3rd and 7. Barrett Carter's going to be coming through that A or B gap. Who do you want out there blocking him?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I guess it's got to be Branson, right? We think, provided that surgically repaired knee, that it is, and it may be, obviously it's healthier. They wouldn't put him out there, but psychologically, where is Branson at? And in terms of just knowing his assignments and playing at game speed, again, it's been 2 years since this big guy played football. Now, they've played a couple scrimmages, but that's not the same as a game day in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. So there's questions, and maybe you don't even call that play. That's the other thing, Cody. If you take Trevor Etienne off the field, I think you take out a hunkier playbook. And now all of a sudden, there's just not as many options. And Clemson knows that. Clemson knows that there's no Trevor Etienne in the backfield. Maybe they want him to throw the ball to Frazier. Again, a talented player, but one of the players at a recent scrimmage said, hey, Frazier looked great, but one time he dropped a pass in the open field with 20 yards ahead of him. Another time he fumbled in a tackle drill. So, or there's Branson Robinson and the surgically repaired knee, the first game back, or there's little Cash Jones, the wily, little engine that could. And how much do you really ask him to do? Again, we've seen him do well in spurts, but to your point, how is he in pass protection? And how does he hold up? So there's a lot of questions here. I know it's a very talented backfield, but with Roderick Robinson and perhaps Trevor Etienne missing, Georgia would be thin in those running back ranks.
Yeah, I would like to think. Kirby always says, can I trust you? I think the guy he probably trusts most out of that group is Cash Jones. But again, yeah, I'm not necessarily wanting Cash Jones to be doing pass blocking when it comes down to it. Now, one of the other things we heard in the press conference, we hardly ever get to hear from Carson Beck ahead of a game, but we got to hear from Carson Beck on Monday talking about the game. He was out to ask about the running backs. First thing he said was Branton Robinson. I don't know if that's a tell or if that we should read anything into that or not, but it was really interesting just to hear from Carson Beck ahead of a football game for once.
Yeah, well, I think Carson's ready to talk ahead of football games. I think he's ready to carry the message. I know this. He's certainly a team player. In fact, we had a story on DawgNation.com earlier today that in an upcoming commercial for Georgia Power, Carson insisted that the offensive line be a part of this advertisement. And that's sharing the wealth. I mean, take care of the guys that take care of you. And you've really got to like that maturation and growth from Carson. I mean, look, this is a guy who's earned that money. This is a guy who sat 3 years patiently. When he could have transferred out, he'd have been a certain starter at probably 95% of the schools in the country. But instead, he chose to spend his time in Athens backing up JT Daniels and Stetson Bennett until he had his chance last year. And he did pretty good, 13-1. He's the nation's leading returning passer. He's a projected #1 overall draft pick. I mean, Georgia, by all rights, has essentially an NFL quarterback talent under center. Now, might have had to pay a little bit of money to keep him. And these NIL deals are pretty sweet. But now Carson's sharing the wealth through the NIL, and he'll be looking to share the wealth on Saturday with some new receivers and this backfield, whatever's left of it.
He literally is putting his money where his mouth is, right? He says he wants to be a leader. How do you be? Well, pay the guys in front of you. And I love to see that because you hear so much in the NFL. Guys are buying their offensive line. They all get Rolexes for Christmas. So that's the way to be a leader is to, like you said, put your money where your mouth is. When you talk about Carson Beck too, I watched the games of this weekend and you saw, the Georgia Tech quarterback putting his hands over his ears and it all comes back, right? Yeah, we are going to have this in-helmet communication for the first time. He talked about it, at SEC Media Days. He said, Mike Bobo's so loud. Well, he's going to have to be loud because this is going to be, we just saw in a game in Ireland, the quarterback having to cover his ears. When we get in these SEC games, and Gary Stokan said on DawgNation Daily, he expects 55-45 mix of the crowd. So there's going to be a lot of Clemson folks in there making it very difficult to hear Mike Bobo in Carson Beck's helmet.
Yeah, and Carson really kind of shared a little bit about how this will put him ahead. I mean, remember, this is a guy that solves Rubik's Cube in under a minute and reads defenses in under 10 seconds.
Check your bingo card.
That's right. Now he's going to get to play that much faster. Instead of getting to play with maybe 15 seconds on the play clock and you look up and you say, oh man, there's not time to change the play. Now he's getting it immediate from the sideline and he's watching the defense form while the play's in his head. So Carson, that much quicker, can process and perhaps change plays or perhaps change the alignment, make sure he gets that blocking assignment just right. And that's kind of a question with these radios and helmets from the sideline. Is it going to benefit the defense more or the offense more? And I think that depends on the quarterback and on the defense's ability to execute. Well, with Carson Beck, I will tell you, I think it's a huge advantage for Beck, and I think it's a huge advantage for Georgia because this is a player who knows the offense inside and out, who processes quickly, and now we'll get that information that much faster to get Georgia into the right play most every time.
One of the other things, when we get to hear Carson Beck ahead of a game, we got to hear a little bit of game plan talk. And he talked about this Clemson up front. You've mentioned how really good that front seven is for them. He said they want to take away the run. If Georgia, again, if they are without Trevor Etienne, that's going to be an easier thing to do if you're Clemson. But it was interesting to hear him. He's going to have to try to push those guys back, get them out of the box a little bit, spread them out. Do you feel like he's going to have to play hero ball against Clemson, carry more load on his shoulder without a guy like Etienne in the backfield?
Well, not necessarily, but other players are going to have to step up. You mentioned Cash Jones a minute ago, and yes, using him as a pass blocker on a 260-pound player wouldn't seem like a good idea, but what Cash does very well is catch the ball in the flats, and one of the ways you can neutralize the rush is to get the ball out quickly. We saw Stetson Bennett do a lot of that in 2022, and I think you'll see Carson do some of that here. You could run some tight end screens. Now, it's not Brock Bowers out there anymore, but Oscar Delp is plenty capable. We're still waiting to find out more about Benjamin Jurasik, the Stanford transfer. How quickly might he contribute? And you've got some receivers, some shifty receivers. Dominic Lovett's a guy that can step back and catch a receiver screen and make something happen. So I look for some quick passes and maybe some throws to the running backs out of the backfield to neutralize that Clemson pass rush.
Yeah, really what they had to do last year when they had so many guys injured in the backfield. Kirby Smart kept calling it an extension of the run game. We're going to know a lot more about this Georgia team after Saturday's game. We're going to talk about the things on Sunday morning, what we are going to feel like we know about this Georgia team. We'll do that in a little bit. We'll also have our hot and cold segment here on the Beat, but we are so glad you're with us. It's On the Beat, presented by Ingles.
Did you know Ingles only sells USDA choice and prime cuts of meat? Maybe it's time to reward yourself. Our butchers cut all our meat fresh in the store every day. Grass-fed, organic, you name it. Not only that, we'll even cut it to order just the way you like it. And we grind meat fresh in the store multiple times a day. It's all in the bag. That's the best meat in town for the best folks in town. Ingles, low prices, love the savings.
Here at DawgNation, we know there is nothing better than Georgia's first game, especially when it's an opponent like Clemson. But as someone who's lived in Atlanta for the last 6 years, I know that getting to Atlanta could be a hassle. Whether it's hotel, parking, or traffic, it's a pain, and that's the last thing we want you to worry about for the opener. So DawgNation is here to help, along with our partners at Discover Dunwoody. If you've got tickets to the game, Discover Dunwoody will take care of everything else. Their VIP package includes one night at the Hyatt Place Perimeter, luxury round-trip transportation to the DawgNation tailgate, and a one-of-a-kind swag bag that includes an exclusive DawgNation Invasion t-shirt. So let Discover Dunwoody get you to the big game and back in style. For a stress-free weekend, you can register at atlsportstrips.com. Again, that's atlsportstrips.com.
Welcome back into On the Beat. It is a staple of your Monday nights, but I do want to give you a little programming note. Starting on Labor Day, next Monday, our show is going to come to you a half hour earlier. We are going to kick things off at 7 o'clock. It's a new change here at DawgNation. We are going to be Mondays at 7. Before the Hedges is going to come to you Wednesdays at 7 o'clock, and DawgNation at large, as it has been, at 7. So you got 7, 7, 7, lucky sevens all across. Hopefully that means good things for the Dogs. But if you're looking for On the Beat next week, join us at 7 o'clock. It'll be a little bit different. Now, on Sunday morning when we wake up, we're going to know a lot more about this Georgia team than we already do. Whether it's because of the closed practices, we hear whispers and things, but we're never really sure of what this Dog team is going to look like. I feel like FSU fans, they know a lot more about their team on Sunday morning than they did Saturday going into that game against Georgia Tech. So, Mike, my question for you is, when we wake up Sunday morning, what will we be sure about of this Georgia team that maybe we're unsure about right now?
Well, I think that linebacking core, I think C.J. Allen's a guy who's really ready to step up in a big way. Now, C.J. started last year after Jamon Dumas-Johnson suffered the injury and performed really well. Had a big game against Ole Miss. But I don't think he really has become a household name. I think he will be, and I think that'll happen soon. He's the middle linebacker. He's the voice of the defense. I mean, this guy packs a punch, loves to represent his hometown of Barnesville, Georgia, and he is ready to represent the Georgia Bulldogs. So you're going to see C.J. Allen step up from that Mike position. I think he's going to have a really big game. I think he's going to control the Clemson ground game and help make the Tigers one-dimensional. Offensively, I'm a believer in Nate Frazier. What can I say? I think Branson Robinson can run between the tackles and move the sticks and certainly pass block. But in Frazier, you've got a home run hitter. This player has a ton of speed. Now, this is in the event that Trevor Etienne doesn't play, which would be what I would bet as of Monday night as we do the show. But Frazier is explosive. You don't often see true freshmen break through, but this is a very special player who played in the Trinity League in Southern California, and that is the best high school football in the country when you take a look at the Division I prospects that come out of there. Mater Dei High School, same high school that produced JT Daniels. So I like what Frazier can bring. I know I said he's had some nerves in the scrimmages, but they wouldn't be giving him all that work if they didn't believe in him. So I say Nate Frazier is a guy that we're going to be talking about with more than 100 all-purpose yards on Sunday morning.
So you got a 3 on offense and a 3 on defense, C.J. Allen and Nate Frazier. I love that from you. All right, when you talk about this Clemson team, and we heard Kirby Smart talk about it on Monday, you know, this is the Clemson team that, like Georgia, has a coordinator in his second year with an experienced quarterback and a very experienced offensive line, and they've got one of the best rushers in their conference in Phil Maffa. So do you think this game will be a 4-quarter game against Georgia? I think we'll both think that Georgia will win the game, but do you think, we kind of go back to the Oregon game and it was a blowout, right? I'm not sure it's going to be something like that. Do you think it'll be a 4-quarter game because of the way Clemson tries to run the football?
I think it'll be a 4-quarter game because of the way Georgia will play on offense. And that is to say they're not going to turn the ball over. They're going to be patient. They're going to play field position football because really the only way Georgia can lose this game is if they beat itself. And that would be turnovers or special teams miscues or too many explosive plays given up. So I think you're going to see Georgia play this safe. I think you're going to see a very inspired Clemson team. They do have the advantage of having Matt Luke over there on their sideline as an offensive line coach. Remember, he was at Georgia just a couple years ago and understands Kirby Smart's schemes quite well. So I think that's advantage for Clemson. I think Clemson will be fired up. I think this is a game that still will be within 10 points at the start of the 4th quarter, Georgia leading by 10. And to me, that's still a game. I don't know that I think it'll be a 1-score game in the 4th quarter, but I think it'll be a 10-point game going into the 4th quarter. And then you decide, do the Dawgs tack on the extra touchdown when they have the opportunity? They didn't the last time they played Clemson. That was a very deceptive 10-3 final score. Dawgs could have easily scored again. So I say it will be within 10 or less going into the 4th quarter. Although I would put my money on Georgia covering the 13.5-point spread. I think Georgia wins by 17 to 24 points.
You talk about Matt Luke and the offensive line for Clemson for Georgia. One of the big questions all offseason has been the defensive line, also the secondary with some missing pieces back there getting mixed around now. Do you think we will have answers at those two positions, or is that going to be kind of a see as we go 2 or 3 games? Or do you think we'll say, you know what, Naz Stackhouse has made a market improvement from last year to this year?
Kirby Smart was talking on Monday about the experience on the Clemson offensive line. He said 3 of those 5 starters are returning starters, and combined Clemson linemen have more than 100 starts. See, the problem with the Georgia defensive line is it's not completely healthy. Now, Jordan Hall, he was kind of in that spot as that number 3 D tackle. We thought he might take a jump. Instead, he broke a leg, and he's out indefinitely, unfortunately. Xavier McLeod, a guy that they got from South Carolina, really looks the part in a uniform, but I don't know how many snaps he'll get. He's had that abdominal strain going on. And Warren Brinson, I know Kirby's cleared him, but they rested him a little bit with an Achilles heel-related injury. So is Warren really 100%? I think it's time for Jamal Jarrett and Kristen Miller to step up. I think they're going to need those 2 players to play more snaps than they have in the past and get those 3 and outs because you want to keep Clemson's offense off the field. We talked about that just a minute ago. Part of the reason I think it's going to be a 10-point game is because I think Georgia's going to bleed clock. I think Kirby's want to keep that clock running and protect that defense from the Clemson offense getting too many snaps against what I think is an undermanned interior defensive line going into this game.
Yeah, and for that reason, I think Clemson's going to try and pound the ball, and again, the clock will keep going. So I think this game, maybe like the Georgia Tech FSU game, going to move pretty quickly as well. And I think both teams.
Cody, you've brought that game up twice now. Are you trying to jinx the Dawgs? This is the 2nd or 3rd time you've brought up Georgia Tech upsetting Florida State. I'm not getting a good vibe here with that ACC.
What it does is it just says everything I thought I knew. Do I really know? And we thought Georgia Tech would play FSU tough, but you thought FSU, that defensive line, that's going to be one of the best defensive lines. And now all of a sudden I'm like, I don't know that. And so now all these things I thought I knew about Georgia, maybe it's the Larry Munson inside of me is like, hey, I don't know about all that. So I do wonder, and I don't think that we'll have answers on that defensive line come Sunday morning. I think we'll have to kind of see that progress throughout the year, and we'll say, was it just because it was an experienced Clemson offensive line? Was it because maybe Georgia got an early lead and put them in pass situations? So I don't think we'll have answers to that. I think that's going to be an ongoing thing. One of the things we did, I think back to the last Clemson game, we kind of got the secondary figured out in that game as well. And as we go through, do we say it's a pretty clear Julio Humphrey, I think, is going to be a guy. He's going to be the other guy beside Dalen Everett on the other side. And will he establish himself, or will there be, a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of challenging going on throughout the first few games?
Yeah, Daniel Harris is super talented and long. Now, Ellis Robinson is a guy who was a very high-rated recruit, but I got to tell you, Cody, watching the kid on the field, he just looks a little small and fragile. I just don't know if he's ready to come up and run support and punch one of those big running backs in the mouth or take on a blocker on one of those screens. I think you could see him in situations, but I don't think the talented freshman Ellis Robinson is ready for down in and down out play. Now, Harris is different. This kid is long,
he looks
and
NFL,
fast, and special. He looks NFL, as does Humphrey. So that's a good problem to have when you've got two future NFL players competing for playing time. I've got a bigger question about Jonel Aguero, and not because he wasn't a great prospect. He was a 5-star, but he's learning the position, and he's coming in behind a guy that I got to tell you was probably one of the most underrated Georgia players of all time. The most productive player on defense last year was Tyke Smith at the star position. And now this is a big drop off. Not to say Aguero doesn't have a ceiling, but he's not going to come in and play like Tyke played. That's the position in the secondary that I circle and say, be very careful with the assignments there, Aguero, because big plays will hurt this defense.
One of the things I love about being at the season is now we get to look back next week and to see if we were totally nuts about what we were saying, or if we were right or wrong. For months now, it's just been, we could just say whatever because our feet won't be to the fire. But now you and I get to talk, and we get to kind of check our work next week, which is going to be so much fun. Mike has up on DawgNation.com right now 5 questions he wants to see answered as Georgia heads into the season. I want you to check that out. We also have the depth chart. Georgia won't put out a depth chart. We will put out a depth chart for you. If you are interested in knowing, you want to pull that up, have it with you as you watch the game on Saturday. That's something that's on DawgNation.com as well. I urge you to get to that. Now, we talked a little bit about that ACC game that happened in Ireland. We'll talk a little more about that as we get to another break. It's our hot and cold segment coming up right after this.
Want to make sure your family stays comfortable all year long? Our family of trained comfort specialists are available anytime to service or repair your system. Or it may be time to replace your old units with a new trained HVAC system.
We are a locally owned family business, and we carefully select the technicians who we send into your home.
At Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing, we are large enough to handle all of your HVAC and plumbing needs,
but small enough to care.
Call today to take advantage of our 3-visit annual maintenance plan.
Welcome back into On the Beat. It is time for the famous hot and cold segment. Who's hot and who's cold, brought to us by Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. And we talked, next week we're going to have so many more choices. This week it didn't really seem like a ton of choices. Week 0 didn't provide a ton of football, and I have a feeling you're not going to go SMU Nevada for who your hot and cold segment is, Mike.
No, we don't have to look far. You got to look at Brent Key and the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets, that 24-21 stunning win over Florida State. Now, a lot of people gave him much of a chance, but you got to give the Yellow Jackets credit. They were able to pound the ball, run the ball effectively against a very talented Florida State team. And I got to tell you, Cody, when Brent Key was named the interim head coach, this was a no-brainer for me. I mean, you just look at the guy. I mean, this is a guy that played at Georgia Tech, beat Georgia. I believe he won 3 out of 4 against Georgia as a player. This is a guy that was on a Nick Saban staff that beat Georgia as well, coached the offensive line. You know, kind of the anti-Kirby Smart and offensive line coach versus Kirby being a DB and now a DB coach and now a head coach at Georgia. It was very clear to me that Brent Key was the answer. And I still remember a lot of Georgia Tech fans, well, you know, there's this coach down there at Tulane that's, no, you need one of your own that understands your culture, that can speak to the boosters and speak to the administration and understands the needs. And you got to give Brent Key a lot of credit. Now, Georgia Tech doesn't play Georgia till the end of the year, and there's a pretty good chance the Yellow Jackets are going to have some injuries, and that depth does not appear to be of championship ilk. It's not to say they won't be a challenge, but it won't be the same exact team that played Florida State. So I think Georgia Tech is off to a great start. I think it's a program win. A lot of Georgia fans love that game. I've been saying, I don't know why you're playing it. You don't get any extra points for beating them. The only thing that can happen is you lose. And everybody said, well, it can be a good game. Be careful what you wish for. Do you really want that good of a game that now Georgia Tech perhaps can try to recruit or get a player, even just one player? Cody, if they get one player that Georgia wants, that's probably one too many for Bulldogs fans.
And they just picked up Christian Garrett, a decommitment from Georgia, has committed to Georgia Tech. But I'll tell you one thing Brent Key also knew what to do. He knew to go find an offensive coordinator out of a championship-winning program, and that's what he did. He found Buster Faulkner, and Faulkner, former, of course, Georgia quarterback coach with Stetson Bennett, was on that staff for a while. Got a lot of FaceTime during that game. He is very hot right now. To me, what stands out, he's got Haynes King. What stands out is that his time at Georgia Tech doesn't seem like it's going to be very long. It seems like somebody's going to snatch him up. Now, will he wait for the right opportunity? Buster, of course, an Atlanta native, went to Parkview High School where he played quarterback. Shout out to our friend John Stinchcomb as well. But so will he wait for the right moment to go find somewhere? I don't know. But he also is not going to have a better quarterback than Haynes King, it looks like, moving forward. One of the things I will say for Georgia Tech fans that are maybe overreacting a little bit, one thing they cannot do is put the ball on the ground like they did in that game. If FSU hops on one of those fumbles, is a completely different football game. All right, Mike. So if Georgia Tech's hot, I can guess who's cold.
They were ice cold in Fort Lauderdale not too long ago. Florida State, all we heard about was the Seminole tears about how, opting out players because they belonged in the playoff and they could have won without their starting quarterback. They said, well, listen, they had a high-profile transfer quarterback, DJU. You remember from the Clemson, Georgia game? He was at Oregon State last year, put up some really good numbers, and they still couldn't beat Tech. And Mike Norvell, I don't know if anybody's been celebrated more for doing less. This guy got a $3 million raise on the heels of losing 63-3. One of the worst bowl loss. Excuse me, let me correct myself. The worst bowl loss in history. And the man got a $3 million raise because he was rumored to be an Alabama candidate. And all these Georgia fans now are saying, oh, if only the Tide had hired him. Now, seriously, Norvell had done a pretty good job, but Cody, this brings up a lot of questions. I don't know how you could not have your team ready to play. Now, I don't want to take any credit away from Georgia Tech, but if they were a 9 or a 10-win team, I'd be very surprised. I expected Florida State to compete for a national championship. Now, maybe a 7-win team.
Did he break the culture at FSU that he was trying to build with the way they handled the Orange Bowl, and he kind of excused all his guys not playing?
Well, it did send a message, you're right. And it's hard to know how to manage that situation. It was one of the unintended consequences of NIL dealings and the ability to transfer right away. You didn't know how these transfers would take it when it got to the postseason. Now, you saw Georgia. Every healthy Georgia player played in that football game, even though it, quote unquote, didn't matter in the playoffs. Listen, it mattered to the Georgia players to wear that G one more time. That's the culture that Kirby Smart has built. Playing for your brother, playing for one another, representing your school. Florida State, on the other hand, was so many high-profile transfers. Those players hadn't put the time in there. They didn't bleed garnet and gold. They cared more about themselves than the team, and they made decisions that exhibited that. They'll never live that down. It'll never go away. And I dare say that losing to Georgia Tech in an opening game may have been more embarrassing than losing 63-3 to a 13-1 Georgia team. What do you say, Cody?
I think, yeah, they were, according to them, they were trying in the game against Georgia Tech. They say they were not trying in the game against Georgia. Like I said, next week we're going to have so many more games. This is going to be a really fun week of college football. You got Miami and Florida. You got Texas A&M doing their thing against Notre Dame. Going to have so many more candidates for hot and cold. Is there a game in particular you're looking forward to most this week, Mike?
I think the Miami and Florida game. I talked with Mark Richt about it. He works for the ACC network. He really likes this Miami team. Now, of course, Coach Richt also went to college at Miami, so maybe a little bias there. But the Gators, listen, Billy Napier needs this. If Florida loses to Miami, the drums will start to beat louder in Gainesville. And you just don't know. Could we have an in-season firing? Will Billy Napier make it to the Georgia game as the Gators head coach? And if he's not the head coach, who takes over? Do they call up Buster Faulkner at Georgia Tech, Cody, and tell him to come on over and take over or do they wait and maybe hire the Liberty head coach, who I think is in line to be the next Florida head coach? We'll wait and see.
We'll mark it down, August 26th. Mike's already called the successor at Florida. And, Mike, I know you're doing something special this year with your talking to SEC, and it's a much bigger league than it's ever been, so you're taking things to the next level, right?
Oh, no doubt about it. I'm really looking forward to all the appearances that we have here on our DawgNation programming. I do that DawgNation Daily Show with Brandon Adams every Wednesday. And of course, in addition to our On the Beat show on Monday nights, I'm on the SEC Network on Thursdays on the Paul Feinbaum Show. I'm also looking forward to some more content on Georgia football, SEC football, and national football. So I'm going to branch out, try to do a little bit more enterprise work. I did a story on Sunday. I don't know if you saw this. Everybody knows this already, that there's a possibility that Georgia could play in Mercedes-Benz Stadium 4 times this year. We know that. They're playing in the opener against Clemson. There's the SEC championship game. The Peach Bowl is one of the playoff games. And then, of course, the national championship games there. Well, Cody, what if Georgia Tech makes the playoff, gets seated ahead of Georgia, and declares Mercedes-Benz their home stadium? You could have 5 Georgia games. Now, that one's out there. That's pretty doggone remote. But I think 4 trips through the Benz is probable and likely for the Bulldogs this season.
Yeah, it would be interesting to see Georgia Tech make the playoff and then decide they would not want to play it at Grant Field. It would be...
Well, if it's cold enough, right? I mean, if you got 25-degree weather and 55,000 fans, why not put it in the Benz?
It would be very interesting. I think the one thing for Georgia fans, if they end up playing in the Benz that many times, it would actually be a disappointment because I think there's still a tie. If you're the SEC champion, you're going to get that bye. And then you're going to probably go to the Sugar Bowl. I think there's still a tie there, at least when I spoke with Gary Stoken at SEC Media Day. So ideally, you're not, if you're a Georgia fan, going to do that. But it's really possible. And I didn't even think about the 5th possibility. Yeah, I'd love you throwing that in there. That's a lot of fun to think about. And there's no way the committee would make Georgia Tech, having played like just 2 weeks before one of those first-round playoff games, would be very interesting as well. And you got your Super 16 poll this year. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, really looking forward to the Super 16. We got a poll of writers from all over the Southeastern Conference, even a few out there, Texas, Oklahoma. And every week we're going to be ranking those teams 1 through 16 to see how they stack up in the SEC. And I'll be asking different questions throughout the year. Like this week, for example, we know most people are picking Georgia, but who's the dark horse to win the SEC? Is it Ole Miss? Is it Missouri? Is it Tennessee? Would we call Alabama or Texas a dark horse? I guess it depends on how you look at horses. But to me, I would say Ole Miss is the dark horse. I think they have a very favorable schedule. Of course, they would have to beat Georgia in Oxford. We've seen that before. Kirby's first year when Hugh Freeze was head coach. I still think it's remote. I still think Georgia is the odds-on favorite to win. That's my pick to win the SEC. But if Georgia doesn't win it, it wouldn't surprise me if Ole Miss was right there and close to the top of the league.
Really interesting stuff there, and I love that you're talking to everybody around the league because here on The Beat, that's what we do, right? Mike, you come in here with so much decades of experience in the Southeastern Conference. You can provide us a perspective that none of us can have, especially as Georgia people. So it's really good to have somebody who knows what's going on around the league and can bring that to us every Monday night. Again, next Monday night at 7 o'clock on The Beat. Are you going to be ready a little bit earlier next week, Mike?
I'm going to be way ready. I'm going to be ready Sunday to tape the show on Monday because those games Saturday are going to tell us so much. And yet it's the tip of the iceberg, right? We know this Georgia football team, whatever you see out there Saturday will be better the next week. Of course, it helps it's Tennessee Tech, but I think they'll look even better against Kentucky. We talk about the defensive line. We talk about the running back situation. Dawgs a little staggered those spots. They're going to look much better at those positions moving forward.
And that'll be the home opener, Tennessee Tech, the next week. So much to talk about. Really appreciate your time, Mike, this week. It's been great being with you here on The Beat as we kind of kick off the new look of this show, and we kick off the 2024 season. Going to be a great one. High noon kickoff in Mercedes-Benz. We'll wrap it up all for you on DawgNation.com. We'll see you right back here on The Beat next week at 7 o'clock.